Here we are, episode 7 of the Heat Check podcast. Took a little break there. Truty got him some well-deserved vacation down in Florida. Little stop in the Big Easy. Did you run into Anthony Davis down there?
The Big Easy? You mean the Sunshine State?
Sunshine State. So, so we had talked about the Eastern Conference in our last podcast, and we had planned to talk about the Western Conference in our next one, but then Truty left, and the entire NBA blew a gasket while he was gone. So we're going to scrap the Western Conference podcast for now and talk about everything that happened while he was gone, and it should be a pretty good one here. But first, the XX. Check podcast episode 7, and where do we begin but Kyrie Irving wants out of Cleveland, does not want to play with LeBron anymore, or so ESPN is reporting. Brian Windhorst, Zach Lowe, all those guys confirming it. Trudy, what is he thinking?
Well, I think Kyrie Irving right here is realizing that he wants to be in his own man. I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, actually. I wrote on the Heat Check blog that we have. We have a link in the description of this video to our blog, the Heat Check, and I actually wrote a piece about this July 23rd, about a week back, and just talking a little bit about Kyrie Irving's impact with Cleveland and what he's really been able to do with LeBron and without LeBron. And as much as, I kind of catch some flack for disliking LeBron at times and hating on him, but in all honesty, he makes teams better in terms of winning regular season games and playoff games. And, with him and Kyrie, they've both elevated their game as they've bonded together as teammates. But Kyrie's kind of looks like he's decided to really wanting to go towards his own team and create his own path. I think he's probably felt like he's learned enough about how to run a team and how to be the man, I guess, in his eyes. But he's really put up some great numbers in his career. Early on, just his first 3 years, averaged 18.5 the first year, 22.5 the next year, 20.8 the year after that. Just an incredible score. And really, in terms of production, his value really hasn't changed too much in the later years with LeBron. The only thing that's changed is being able to get more wins. And I think the bigger thing is, I think for Kyrie's sake, he just wants to make the playoffs. And we've seen what he can do in the playoffs and how effective he can be in those tough situations. Obviously, the big notable one is the Game 7 against Golden State a year back in the finals. But he's just had a lot of occasions, where he's able to really show up and be a guy that LeBron needs to win games and win important games, because LeBron is just not known as a closer, and that's really says it all. I mean, he needs Kyrie to close games out a lot of times, and when Kyrie can't do that, sometimes it really just spells, bad things for Cleveland and their chances of winning that particular game. So, just for me, I think what a lot of people think the same. He probably just kind of feels wants to have his own team, and I think there might be something there that we don't see, because it just seemed a little bit out of nowhere. I mean, maybe he's just been holding something in. I don't know. Maybe there's really a lot of people seems like they've had good relationships with LeBron as a teammate, and I don't know why Kyrie would be that much different. So it seems like it's more of a personal thing for Kyrie wanting to find his own way and be on his own team. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it. I don't know what else we could read into about this.
Yeah, I agree with you that Kyrie really wants to be his own man. But at the same time, it just doesn't make sense to me. When you are playing with LeBron, you're playing in the East, you're basically guaranteed a shot at the finals every single year. And if he goes to, let's say, some team in the Western Conference, that's just not going to be the case. He has lost to Golden State with LeBron on his team. There's no doubt he's going to lose to Golden State without LeBron on his team.
Yeah.
And so for him, and it's funny because lately it seems like, the focus of players and their legacies has really shifted to winning championships as the end-all be-all. We saw Kevin Durant solidify his title chances going to Golden State. We've seen guys jump to Go play with LeBron in Cleveland, get a chance at a ring. Jump on the Warriors, get a chance at a ring. We're having superstars team up down in Houston. It started in Miami. For this era, at least, started in Miami. Now we have superstars teaming up in Houston, San Antonio. They were on the Clippers. We have them in Cleveland, Boston, Golden State. So it's Oklahoma City now with Paul George. So it's a really refreshing change of pace to see a guy who isn't necessarily concerned so much about maybe winning a championship as a number two option when he would rather carry a team to the playoffs and maybe the finals one day as a number one option. Now, is Kyrie the type of guy that can do that? I'm not convinced. I don't know if he's the playmaker that you need that can carry you to the finals like that, but he thinks he is. He thinks he can be. And when you're on a team with LeBron, you're automatically, unless you're a guy like Chris Paul or Ricky Rubio or some guy like that, somebody that's known for their passing abilities, when you're playing on a team with LeBron, you're automatically going to get bumped down to the number two playmaker and the number two facilitator. So that hasn't really given Kyrie a chance to really show what he can do from a playmaking standpoint since he's kind of matured and entered the start of his prime here. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you think Kyrie is the kind of guy that can carry a team to the finals a la Allen Iverson back in the early 2000s?
That was a rare occasion, I think, with AI. I think I agree the playmaking ability and the same kind of play style applies right there. But again, the priority for Kyrie at this point, it definitely does not seem like it's a championship anymore. It seems like guys are kind of like now, or for him in particular, he's been at 3 straight finals, so I guess he feels like he has an adequate taste of what it's like to have team success. Now he wants to have more individual success and more individual accolades, which is interesting. Again, as you see with Durant, the opposite happened. He wanted more team success and had to go to Golden State and finding that and wants to get a couple more rings to his name. But going back to what you said about Kyrie, can he do it? Can he complete that, finals run or anything remotely close to that on a new team as the main man? I think that it's a really tough thing to do. We've seen Russell Westbrook try his best, I feel like last year, to do that as a one-man kind of wrecking crew. And it's so difficult, I think, to do something like that. I don't know if the Eastern Conference I think the Eastern Conference was also weak during AI's time as well. And, if Westbrook played in the East this past season, maybe he makes a miraculous run like that. I doubt it because LeBron would probably stop him in the East, and there really wasn't a team like that to stop AI in the East. So I think just the landscape is just a little bit too difficult and too rugged for a guy like Kyrie to carry a team all the way to the finals. I don't think that's really realistic for really anybody at this point. I mean, even LeBron can do it, but the East, he's one of, the few ever to be able to do something like that, and the East is also weak at this point. So I don't see Kyrie being able to do it. And it's funny because I feel like if Westbrook can't do it in OKC, I don't think Kyrie could really do it anywhere either. So, I mean, that's just my eyes on it, or my opinion on it, and how I see things with Kyrie.
Yeah, I really feel like there had to be something going on behind the lines because what was it in June? Kyrie is out there talking about how much he loves LeBron and how much he looks up to him and how he's been such a leader and a mentor for him as during his time in Cleveland. And then all of a sudden for him to come out and specifically say, I don't want to play with LeBron anymore. There's a bunch of ways that he could have done that. He could have come out and said, I'm ready to take the reins of my own team. I'm ready to play somewhere that's not Cleveland. I'm ready to explore other teams out there. But the way it came out and for him to specifically target LeBron was really, really odd to me. And because of the way that everything came out, a lot of people are saying, oh, LeBron's going to leave in 2018 and Kyrie is trying to get out first. But if that was the case, why would he go out of his way to kind of, dig on LeBron a little bit on his way out? If he knows LeBron's going to leave already and he wants out before he does, why doesn't he just come out and say, I want to play somewhere else? It's not like you have to have a reason to want to get traded. And maybe his reason is he wants to be the number one guy. And, if he said that, we would all understand and we wouldn't really take it as a shot at LeBron. But I mean, he kind of did take a shot at LeBron, called him out by name, said he didn't really want to play with him anymore, and he was tired of being his second fiddle. So I don't think that lends any credibility to people thinking that LeBron is going to leave in 2018. I personally think he's going to, especially now if Kyrie wants out. But I'm not thinking that um, LeBron's already decided and that Kyrie's trying to get out ahead of time. I don't buy that. Something had to have gone down behind the scenes with them. Maybe it's something that happened in the finals. Maybe Kyrie didn't like how thoroughly dismantled they got by Golden State. But whatever it was, something happened to spark a pretty big change that could shake up a lot of things in the NBA.
Yeah, really the funny thing we were talking about a little bit earlier is the possibilities of the trades that could happen or where it could actually end up and how that would really impact the NBA landscape. They were talking a little bit about him, possibly going to the Knicks, the Timberwolves. The Bulls were a place where actually they discussed him talking about wanting to go to when they had Jimmy Butler. That's no longer, really a realistic scenario. But just those places, San Antonio, it's really crazy to think about a guy like Kyrie and his talent to be added on to these other teams and what could possibly happen. So, what do you think is the most realistic destination for Kyrie, or do you think he's really just going to stay put in Cleveland as we're heading on into August, pretty rapidly?
Well, I think that they're going to hang on to Kyrie for quite some time. I don't think that he will finish the year as a Cavalier by any means, but I don't think they're in any position to go ahead and rush this trade, especially seeing what went down with the Paul George trades and, um, you know, guys like Chris Paul, who really show you how hard it is to trade a superstar in this league because so few assets um, turn into superstars like that. So there's an old saying that 4 quarters doesn't equal a dollar, especially when you're talking about the NBA. And if you trade Kyrie, you may get 4 pieces back for him. But there's no guarantee that those 4 pieces are going to add up to equal the impact that he had on that team. So now Cleveland is faced with a really tough decision here. There's the threat of LeBron leaving in 2018, kind of looming over their heads now. So they're kind of stuck. Right now, they're broke in the future. They have no young players. They have no good picks. And they don't really have any good contracts that they can, use in a trade to kind of get something back for Kyrie. JR making, I think it's 11 million a year. Shumpert making 11 million a year. Tristan Thompson with the near max money. So those aren't exactly contracts that people are going to be eager to take on. So does Cleveland build for the future, or do they try to get win now pieces to contend with Golden State in the finals and maybe convince LeBron to stay? I don't know. If I were them, I would go for a healthy mix of both. And I think to do that, the best trade destination for Kyrie is going to be the Timberwolves or the Denver Nuggets. And the Nuggets are really interesting to me. They have some young pieces. They have some really talented guys. Obviously, they have Jokic down there. They also have Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, who is a stud and looks like he's going to be a stud, along with, Hernan Gomez.
Freed is a big one as well because, he's a younger guy, and Kevin Love is a little bit old. Kevin Love isn't too old, actually, kind of around the same age as Freed, but Freed isn't a guy that I think, or he is a player that the Nuggets too probably want to get rid of at some point, I would think. I mean, he's been there a while, but maybe not. Maybe he's a guy they want to keep. But they got some pieces, you're right, for sure. They definitely got some young pieces in Denver. And you talked about Cleveland in like whether or not they should rebuild. I don't know if they can even be in like they're just such an aging team and a team in their prime of the terms of their age. They don't have a lot of room to like rebuild, like they got it. Like they almost, I think they're forced to try and win now. Like I don't think it's an option for them. I think that with the contract you talked about them having and the players and the age group that they got going, like they have to win now or never, because once LeBron leaves, this team is not gonna. This is not good. Like, this is not a setup. You got Richard Jefferson, 37, and aging Derrick Rose. They signed Jeff Green recently. Tristan Thompson is not bad, but who knows how good he can really be by himself. J.R. Smith is really inconsistent. Shumpert as well, offensively, really inconsistent, and defensively, he's kind of slowed down. Channing Frye and Corver will be done in a couple of years. And, it's just, I don't see this team really doing much if they don't win now. So they need to try and maintain this core as long as they possibly can. And again, that makes it so difficult, because if what happened with Kyrie is true, then they have to make a decision. Do you want to play with a guy who really doesn't want to play there, or do you try to move him? And if you move him, you have to be careful again, because we've seen you might not get a bunch in return if you do that. So it's a risky situation for Cleveland right now, to be honest with you. Really delicate situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think so I misspoke earlier. I said that the best trade partners for them would be Minnesota and Denver if they wanted to win now. I meant to say that if they wanted to rebuild. Obviously, Minnesota can probably give up Wiggins, maybe toss Jeff Teague in there, and they also have some solid picks. Denver has Gary Harris, Jamal Murray. Those guys are kind of a Kyrie similar player, so they could slot right into Cleveland's lineup and adjust having LeBron there. Now, if they want to win now, I think the two trade destinations that are looking really promising for them are going to be Miami and Phoenix. Now, I'm really intrigued by Miami, and I'm surprised that I haven't heard their name come up more. Pat Riley has kind of whiffed in the last couple of free agencies on nabbing some superstars. He missed on Carmelo, he missed on Durant, he missed on keeping D Wade, and he lost LeBron in 2014. So, and Hayward. He missed on Hayward as well. So a guy adding a marquee guy like Kyrie, it's a big market. It would instantly become his team. And, it has that strong front office that it's been reported that Kyrie is looking for. I think it's a perfect fit. Now, what would Miami have to give up in return? Obviously, they have Goran Dragic, and Dragic would be the perfect fit next to LeBron. He's an excellent slasher. He's fantastic from three, especially catching and shooting. He doesn't always have to have the ball in his hands to be effective, a lot like Kyrie. And, he can get to the line and he can still create offense in crunch time while he's not a great defender, but he's certainly better than Kyrie on that end. So if Miami were to say send Dragic and Justice Winslow plus a couple picks, Winslow gives them a young piece to build around in the future if they can work on his offensive game and have him learn under LeBron for at least a year. And Dragic can slide in that starting point guard role next to LeBron, be the secondary facilitator and playmaker. And I think that's still a finals-worthy team. I don't think the drop-off between Kyrie and Dragic is as big as people imagine it to be. Now with Phoenix, the same thing goes for Eric Bledsoe. Bledsoe is a fantastic point guard, and he plays in such a small market, and he's had a bit of an injury history in the past, and so he gets overlooked a lot, especially when we're talking about, this echelon of great point guards that we have in the league right now. But Bledsoe is another guy that would fit right next to LeBron. He can play off the ball. He can make plays on his own. And better yet, he's a fantastic defender, which is something you definitely need when you're going up against a backcourt like Golden State's. And the Suns have young pieces as well. I think that Devin Booker is an untouchable for them. I don't see them trading him for anyone. Same goes for Josh Jackson is what we're hearing. But if Cleveland could somehow convince, Bledsoe and Josh Jackson for Kyrie, I think that's a trade you have to take. If Bledsoe and Jackson are on the table, that you have to take that if you're Cleveland. That gives you the pieces to win now, and then it gives you a potential superstar to build around in Josh Jackson. So if I'm Cleveland, those are the two teams that I'm looking for. I'm looking for Miami and Phoenix, not Minnesota and Denver, because Miami and Phoenix both kind of give you that ability to still contend right now, but not be so completely screwed in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, for sure. in Miami's situation, yeah, they got some wiggle room right there in moving Dragic and Justice Winslow. It's just kind of crazy to think about because the Cavs are almost primed to win now. I feel like regardless of what happens, because they're probably going to get some pretty good pieces in return for Kyrie. But at the end of the day, Kyrie is just God. It's just a crazy situation to me. Like the fact that he really doesn't really want to stay in Cleveland. Again, you mentioned that like it's such a easy path really to the finals, and the fact that he can just go out and leave, kind of crazy to think about. But I don't know. What else would you like to add to the whole Kyrie situation?
Well, when Brian Windhorst initially reported this for ESPN, he came out and said that, this had been an issue in the past, but the Cavs GM David Griffin would always be there, talk Kyrie down, smooth things over, and really convince him that, this is the best place for him to be and this is where he should want to be. And I don't think it's any coincidence that, Griff, for all intents and purposes, gets fired and they don't renew his contract, and all this Kyrie stuff starts coming out of the woods. I think it just goes to show you how inept the Cavs management really is. Griffin was about as good as a GM as you could get, especially for that team and their cap situation. He was fantastic at managing egos. Anytime you have LeBron on your team, you're going to have to deal with his ego and the stuff that comes with, and the publicity that just comes with having him on your team. And Griffin always did a great job with that. He was a big fan of LeBron's. LeBron was a big fan of his. Same with Kyrie. And so for them to not renew his contract 3 days before the draft, it kind of threw the whole team in flux. And it was really, really strange timing. And I don't understand, why they didn't renew his contract or why they didn't fire him if they were so intent on letting him leave. So I think that Kyrie wants out. He wants to go somewhere that there's stability in the front office. He wants to go somewhere where he's the number one guy because he's tired of playing in LeBron's shadow all the time. And he has such a close relationship with Kobe Bryant. That's the guy that he looked up to coming to the league, and that's who he tries to model his game after. So it's not super surprising that he's going to have that alpha dog mentality, because let's not forget, Kobe ran Shaq out of town in almost the same way. So I don't know. It definitely came out of nowhere, but when you dig a little deeper, you can kind of see why. But at the same time, I mean, a guaranteed finals run next to the best player on the planet, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's a good comparison right there, the Shaq and Kobe. Again, the difference is, I guess, the championships won, but they both went to 3 or 4 finals, basically. Shaq and Kobe went to 4, but, Kyrie and LeBron going to 3. So, yeah, that basically wraps up Kyrie. I feel like that's pretty good on him. I don't know. You want to go into Gallinari next or anything on those lines? What's happening recently with the NBA?
I am so disappointed in Gallinari. Not even less than a week ago, I finished a piece for the blog talking about how the Clippers were poised to be a playoff team. They weren't going to be as bad as people thought they were, and really the only thing that they had to do was stay healthy. And less than 7 days after I write that, Gallinari goes and punches an opponent in a meaningless Euro exhibition game, breaks his hand. It's just idiotic. Why? I don't understand. The Clippers have to be the most unlucky franchise in the history of franchises, right? I mean, good God.
Yeah, they've not had a great string of luck in the past.
I wrote about this in my piece, but if I'm not mistaken, it took the Clippers almost 48 years to win more than 50 games.
Wow.
In the entire history of their franchise, 2012 was the first year that they won more than 50 games.
That's ridiculous.
That's insane. And so then they go on this run, they're the third best team in the league. For those 5 years, at least record wise. But obviously the playoff disappointment. Now Chris Paul leaves. They bring in Gallinari. They bring in Teodosic. They bring in Patrick Beverly. You know, solid guys, solid role players. Gallinari is a 20-point a game scorer. You know, he's no slouch himself. Um, and all they had to do was stay healthy. And now Gallinari goes and breaks his hand. You know, he might not be ready for training camp. You know, if it turns out worse than they thought it could be, he could have surgery and miss part of the season. It's just a bad look all the way around, and it kind of scares me for this upcoming season. Now I'm just holding my breath on Blake Griffin to see what stupid thing he does to get hurt this year.
Yeah, the Clippers are kind of a weird situation still. You lose Chris Paul, and you get some nice pieces again with Beverly, Decker, Lou Williams. You get some nice pieces there. Montrezl Harrell, and Gallinari goes and hurts himself, and that really, if he can't play, that's gonna really hurt this team a lot. Like, they need all the pieces that they have at the moment because I don't know if this team is really very deep at the moment. To be honest with you, they don't look like they have a lot of guys that can just step in and really play a significant role. In the West, as tough as it is, it's gonna be really. I don't know how the season's gonna go with LA. I don't know. What are your thoughts on like the Clippers and like in terms of their success this season? To be honest with you, because like I know in the long run they might be a little bit better off, but I mean Lou Williams and Beverly are heading on in their 30s. So is Gallinari. Blake Griffin is sort of injury prone. The West is just getting tougher. The Clippers could fall out of the playoff contention within the next year or two, in my eyes.
So here's why I think that if I am, let's say I was going to write a piece about, the 5 most interesting teams in the NBA right now, the Clippers would probably crack my top 3 because they're in such a weird spot, like you said.
Yeah, they are. They really are. Because all their players almost seem like they're primed to win at the moment. They almost seem like they're all in their prime.
And the variation between their ceiling and their floor as a team is so crazy. If you were, let's say you were a time traveler, and you came to me and you said the Clippers are going to finish 5th in the West and they're going to win 48 games, I would believe you. I would be a little surprised, but I'd believe you. I'd probably guess that Blake had an MVP type season. Gallinari upped his scoring to like 23 points a game. DeAndre Jordan held down the paint, and Teodosic had a fantastic debut in the NBA. Now, if you came to me with the same situation and said the Clippers finished 11th in the West, I would believe you. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I'd probably guess that Blake and Gallinari both got hurt. Teodosic couldn't cut it in the NBA, and they just didn't live up to their hype. So just those crazy swings that this team could be on. My guess for them is they land somewhere in the 5 to 7 range in the playoffs. I think that Blake by himself is good enough of a player. He's a superstar in his own right, and he's good enough of a player to put a team on his back and carry him to the playoffs, a lot like Russell Westbrook did this year. So, that being said, in no way do I think that they're contenders. At least not right now. But I really like what the Clippers have done in terms of a rebuild because so many teams in the league right now focus so much on, championships or bust. We're either going to contend for a title or we're going to tank. And there's no in between. But there is an in between. That's what that whole crazy period we call free agency is for. And, the Clippers have about as big a draw as anybody else in free agency. They have 2 All-NBA type players in Griffin and Jordan, solid role players now. They have a bench. They're not going to be lacking on the bench anymore like they used to. And they play in one of the biggest markets in the country. So it's definitely not this, Clippers franchise of old that nobody wanted to play for, that were always, the bottom feeders of the league. So everything about their future, to me, hinges on this upcoming season. If they can stay healthy, if they can nab a playoff spot in the West, if they can win 45 games, 48 games, if they can take a game or 2 in the first round, then all of a sudden, 2018, LeBron becomes a free agent. Year after that, Melo becomes a free agent. D Wade becomes a free agent. A couple other guys become free agents that are going to be looking for a team, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were seriously considering the Clippers as one of them. And so that's why, to me, the Clippers are interesting because they are in a rebuild, yes, in the terms of they were contenders and they're not anymore, but they're not going to be this terrible, terrible team that's contending for the number one pick in the lottery. You know what I'm saying? They have a real shot at a future. They just have to stay healthy and play their cards right and nab somebody in free agency. And all of a sudden, they're contenders again because Blake Griffin, DeAndre, plus another All NBA type guy those are definitely contenders, especially with the timeline adding up right as the Warriors are going to be breaking up because I don't think they can afford to pay their four core guys.
Yeah, actually, I was going to get into that a little bit, and like the team that you think in the West really within the next, couple of years or post Golden State, I guess within 5 years, post Golden State, post Popovich, who's going to be the next team? Is it going to be Houston? Is LA going to be able to, like you said, acquire a guy that can really, help them out in free agency? Because there are some players coming up. Is Westbrook? Westbrook might be an option at some point. Who knows? Maybe he's the guy from LA. Does he really prefer the Lakers over the Clippers or what? Not. I guess Paul George really attached to the Clippers, or to the Lakers. But who do you think is going to be the next real team? Because we talk about like the Timberwolves, we talk about the Nuggets, but it's funny because again you talked about the post Warriors. I don't know what the next team would be. I really don't know. I don't know if there's a clear cut favorite because you see some promising things, but I think maybe it's just too much to really project at this point to see what the next team will be in the future because things can really move around pretty quickly in the NBA as we've kind of seen, especially with Golden State. They kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I was about to bring that up. We talk about who's going to be the next team, who are going to be the next guys, who's going to be the next super team. If let's go back to 2011, 2012, nobody saw this Golden State team coming. 73 wins. Are you kidding me? Steph Curry can't even stay on the floor. His ankles are made of glass. That's what people were saying in 2011. And now we have 3 finals runs, 2 championships, 73 wins in a season, a 2-time MVP, another MVP on the same squad. And it happened like an absolute it was like a tornado. It was just this flash of boom, and then all of a sudden the Warriors were just the best team that the league has arguably ever seen. So can that happen in the next 5 years? Of course. If I were to take bets on it, my guess would be the Timberwolves, just because I feel like they are primed to really take the mantle, so to speak, right when Golden State is starting to break up. Guys are starting to fall out of their primes. The Timberwolves are just going to be hitting theirs. They have a super young core of Wiggins, Butler, and Karl Anthony Towns, which, that's everything you need. You have one of the most unstoppable offensive centers in the game. You have a two-way superstar in Jimmy Butler, and then you have a guy whose job is just to get buckets in Andrew Wiggins. So my guess would be them. I don't think you can count out Anthony Davis. I don't know if he'll still be with the Pelicans because I kind of see Anthony Davis as a modern-day Kevin Garnett back when Kevin Garnett was with the Timberwolves in the early 2000s. He's putting up these great stats. He's obviously an MVP type of player, but the management just can't put a group around him that's built to contend in the playoffs. It's an absolute sham that Anthony Davis has been to the playoffs one time as an 8th seed. A player of his caliber should be in the playoffs every single year. And I don't know if he can do that in New Orleans. So whatever team he moves to, I think becomes an instant contender, especially in the West. So it's really tough to call. If I were to rank them 1, 2, 3, I'd probably go the Timberwolves, whatever team Anthony Davis happens to be on. And then, you never want to count out the Spurs, especially with Kawhi. He'll just be going right into his prime right about then, or kind of ending his prime. So I don't know. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. That's the thing about the NBA. It changes so fast, and it's almost funny to look at. But if you just look at the past four free agencies that we've had, they've been absolutely bonkers. 2014, LeBron leaves Miami. 2015, you have the Warriors exploding into what they're doing. Um, you have Harden coming into his own in Houston. You have all this stuff going on in Toronto. 2016, Kevin Durant signs with the Warriors. And then 2017, now we have Kyrie wants out, Carmelo wants out, Chris Paul to Houston. It's just been this crazy, crazy whirlwind of stories almost every summer. I can't wait to see what the future is going to bring.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that as well on your top three right there. Denver's another team was really interesting to me because I feel like they're, again, I don't think a lot of people expected what happened with Golden State. For some reason, I feel like the Nuggets, I don't know, I feel like the Nuggets could be like a team that could just jump out like that. I don't know why. I feel like they got a lot of young pieces. And I think that the interesting thing is I think Paul Millsap could still be effective even a little bit down the road. And Gary Harris, very talented young player. Jokic, arguably one of the best centers, best young centers in the league. And Fareed is still trying to develop a game a little bit into his own. Maybe Millsap can mentor him a little bit, and maybe they move him around. I don't know. I feel like Denver could be a team that would be interesting to watch in the future. But that's just how I see things with that team in particular in the Western Conference. That's one team that I would want to see. I would be really excited to see that team have some success in the future. So I'm kind of rooting for them to do well. But I don't know if that'll really ever materialize into anything. But you can never really tell. I just think that Jokic is really talented, really fun to watch, and he's a guy that I think that they can really build around. And it's cool that they got a free agent, Paul Millsap. Really excited for anybody who's a fan of the Nuggets this year. I think that they could be good for a couple of years, to be honest with you.
Don't forget about Jamal Murray, too.
Yeah, Jamal Murray as well.
I was really impressed with Jamal Murray. I thought he looked pretty good. He looks like he can, obviously it's always tough to, call a player's ceiling or anything like that. But I think he could definitely turn into a Kyrie-like type of player. A guy that has handles, can run the point, but it's just deadly from outside the arc, and pretty crafty inside of it. So,
yeah,
I was really,
yeah.
I'm with you on the Nuggets. I'm really impressed with the Nuggets. I think that if Jokic can manage to kind of take his defense to the next level, he was a pretty poor defender last year, and Gary Harris can continue to develop his offensive game. This Nuggets team, offensively, they're already one of the best teams in the league, I think. They get white hot from beyond the arc. Watching their game against the Warriors this year when they hit like 24 threes, it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And if they can be more consistent on the offensive end, while kind of improving on the defensive end, just a little bit so that they can really get a stop when they need to against those elite teams, then yeah, they could definitely be a contender in the West in 5 years, easy.
Yeah. Speaking of Nuggets players, let's actually get on into Carmelo Anthony and the updates on his situation. Really hasn't been a lot of talk about him, but I was kind of curious. What are your thoughts on his best fit, really, at this point? And Carmelo, at his age, what is he, 33 years of age? How much longer can he be a viable option for a team as a number one scorer?
So, I think Melo can 100% still be a number one scorer for a team. Now, will that team be a contender? Probably not. I think that he, right now in his career, he would best be served as taking a number two role as a guy that benefits from having defenses focusing on someone else, which is going to allow him to do his thing. He's a fantastic shooter. His footwork is sublime. His finishing ability is still there. And I really think that, we didn't see Melo at his best these past couple of years in New York, and with good reason. If I were him, I would not be playing hard at all. The way the fans have treated him, the way the ownership has treated him, it's been downright awful. And so if if I'm Carmelo, there's no reason for me to play hard for these guys. They don't respect me. They don't really care about me they don't care about me as a man from the things that they've been saying about me in the media. They don't care about me as a player. They've been trying to trade me for the last 3 years. So I think that if we can see Melo get in a new situation, one where he's respected, one where he's treated as the player he is, that he can really flourish. And this guy, if not for Kevin Durant, we would be talking about him as the most generational scorer of this era. The guy can hit from anywhere, and his defense, when he gives effort, it's not elite, but it'll get the job done. He's a guy that can go bucket for bucket with the Warriors when he gets hot. And so let's say you put him on a team like Portland. Now, Portland has Lillard, who would obviously be the number one scoring option there. Then they have two really solid role players in CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic, who, they made the playoffs this last year. They were the 8th seed, but they still made the playoffs. Adding a guy like Carmelo at their weakest spot would definitely take them to the next level and might push them into like the 6th or 5th seeded range. Now, obviously, he's been floating around the idea that he wants to go to Houston, which I have a piece sitting in my drafts that's been sitting there for weeks now about Melo's fit with Houston. Obviously, there's some question marks there. 3 ball dominant scorers. How's that going to work? But it'd still be a good fit, superstars win. That's what they do. And Melo is a superstar. So I think he would fit in Houston. I think he'd fit in Portland. And I think he would fit in Cleveland. He'd kind of give LeBron another scorer to work with, another guy that he can drive and kick to, but someone that can take over in the fourth quarter of games when LeBron gets gassed out like we saw against the Warriors. I don't know why he's still a Knick. I think they need to trade him. There's nobody benefits from him still being in New York. They're not in win now mode, and Carmelo is at this stage in his career. And if I'm him, I do what it takes. I badger them every day until they get a deal done. Waive his no trade clause and get out of New York, because it's toxic right there for him. It's toxic for him. It's toxic for the organization. It's already, started to make a rift between the Knicks management and Porzingis, because Porzingis is seeing how they're treating Carmelo, and he's saying, well, what happens if I don't win? What happens if I get hurt and we don't meet expectations? Is this how I'm going to be treated when I'm the number one guy? So I think it's the best for everyone if Melo just gets out of there. I'd like to see him in Portland or Houston, and then as a third team, Cleveland, just because, why not add another superstar to the mix?
Yeah, it is a tough situation, because I feel like I really wanted to see Carmelo kind of thrive in New York, and it's his hometown. Went to Syracuse, from New York, obviously. So it is unfortunate, but they just have not done a good job of building a roster in New York. They seem like they tried to get a situation rolling with the Derrick Rose and the Joakim Noah acquisition, where they thought they could win now, and a lot of people were kind of high on them. I remember last offseason they were talking about the Knicks being a team that can contend, and there were some high expectations there, and it never materialized at all. It just did not work out. Guys got hurt, and things just didn't translate well. And I agree. At the end of the day, there's no benefit for him being in New York at this point. He's been there long enough. The Knicks don't benefit. He doesn't benefit. He just needs to be traded and move on. And I think that's just how it has to be. To be honest with you.
That Joakim Noah contract should have gotten Phil Jackson fired on the spot. Now, you know how I feel about Derrick Rose, as does most of our listeners. Not the biggest fan. But talking about Derrick Rose, he just signed with Cleveland for, I believe it was for the mid-level exception, about $2.3 million, which was a lot less money than he was expecting. And obviously, with Kyrie there for now, he's looking to come off the bench. This is a big, big step for Derrick Rose. And, you've heard me talk about it before, but I said if Rose really wants to prolong his career and still make an impact for a contender on this league, he needs to come off the bench. Now that he's done that, I'm actually kind of intrigued to see what he does in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Rose in Cleveland is interesting because I always thought of him as kind of a guy that doesn't really pass the ball a lot, for lack of a better phrase or anything like that. He seems like really wants to have the ball in his hands a lot of time to attack the basket. It doesn't seem like he's super intent all the time on giving the ball to guys around him. Really, he's been effective at driving. Again, the injuries are always an issue with him, but it is going to be funny to watch him come off the bench because he could actually legitimately be a big help for Cleveland. They never really had a guy off the bench as a guard who's ever been effective, and Rose might have the potential to actually do that, or does have the potential to do that. But again, the Kyrie Irving situation is crazy because I just don't know, like, with what's been with what has really translated with him. Does he want to even be there? Like, I don't know how he'll play. I guess he's got to just play hard because he can't decide whether or not he wants to leave right now. They got to trade him. So Derrick Rose come off the bench. That could be interesting for his career, in all honesty, but would need to develop a little bit more of a consistent jump shot. And again, staying healthy is really important for him as a whole.
Yeah, it's really. Now, if Kyrie leaves and Derrick Rose gets thrust into the starting point guard spot, I think that the Cavs' title chances are done. Because I've said it 100 times. I don't think that Rose can be a starter for a championship team, which is why I think one of his best fits is going to be where he is in Cleveland. So for him in Chicago during his MVP year, like he really thrived when he was able to drive in, collapse the defense, and kick out to shooters. Now, Chicago was not really known for an offensive team. They didn't really have that many shooters. But Rose did what he could, and he led them to 60 wins. And then obviously the knee injuries happened. So this is where the fit gets really good for Derrick Rose because he basically plays like a mini LeBron James. And that team is built around LeBron James. They're catered to LeBron's strengths, which, like Rose, happen to be driving to the rim, collapsing the defense, and kicking out to the open man. So, if Rose can do that, if he can find his athleticism, if he can find the IQ, to pass to the right man, pass to a guy like Korver or Channing Frye, J.R. Smith, guys like that with the second unit, then I think he can really, really thrive. Obviously his defense is a big question mark. And he's not really a guy that you're going to want to play in crunch time minutes against Golden State because he'll be getting guarded by Klay Thompson on one end, and then he'll have to try and guard Curry on the other, and that's just a disaster for everybody. So if he can really step into his role, realize that it's his job to come off the bench 15 minutes a game, 18 minutes a game, facilitate the offense while LeBron is out, because that's really what Cleveland struggled with this year. Them with LeBron versus them without LeBron, it's like two completely different basketball teams. And like we talked about, Kyrie was never enough of a playmaker to really stagger his minutes in there with the second unit and run the offense while LeBron is out, which is another interesting wrinkle here in the Rose signing. If Rose can find his form, and if Rose can be that guy off the bench that they need, this can finally start to allow LeBron to rest more during the regular season, more in the playoffs. He's not going to be so tired in the finals against Golden State. So Rose really needs to step into this role. He really needs to remember the facilitator that he was in Chicago when he had 8 assists a game. And he really needs to be that guy for Cleveland off the bench. Can he do that? I don't know, because the most dangerous guy in the NBA that you can have is the former superstar who thinks he still is one. If Derrick Rose wants to go out there and win 6th Man of the Year because, he wants to put up 25 points a game off the bench, no, that's not what Cleveland needs. Cleveland needs a guy to facilitate, to spread the ball around, to collapse the defense, and really just make them a passable basketball team when LeBron isn't on the floor. You don't even have to be a positive. You just have to be even, Don't be worse when LeBron is on the floor. Just be even with the other team's bench. You know, that's what it takes to be a contender. You got to have a bench. Cleveland did not have a bench last year, and it showed. I actually think that LeBron had a positive net rating against the Warriors when he was on the floor, but his off rating and the bench's rating was abysmal. The Warriors bench just outclassed them every time. So adding a big marquee guy like Derrick Rose to the bench is a step in the right direction for them, I think, if he can fit in his role. Now, whether he can, that's the question to be seen, and I really don't have an answer for it. It could go either way for me.
Yeah, you have to agree with that. In all honesty, Derrick Rose just has the potential to be a guy that could really play a good role with Cleveland. The whole Kyrie thing still just trips me up because I just don't know. I guess does he still just have to play hard in Cleveland? I guess he just gotta roll with the punches and just continue to be that guy because for a whole season, it's pretty crucial that at the end of the year you have developed a chemistry with your guys and really have united the team. And I don't know if Cleveland can continue to do that with Boston on the rise and things like that. But I guess with LeBron James in his prime, relatively in his prime, relatively speaking, I guess he still will be able to make it back pretty far, or at least pretty close to the finals throughout this next year. But Rose off the bench, interesting prospect right there. Don't know again how it'll translate to on-court production, but I guess it's a step in the right direction for Cleveland because they didn't have a lot of wiggle room to start out with in this offseason and might have even less wiggle room now with the Kyrie Irving sweepstakes at everybody's attention. So we'll see what happens with Cleveland. But again, like I mentioned probably before, I don't know if anybody can really stop Cleveland from making the finals in the East this year. I think it might take another year for a team like Boston to really stop them and take that throne away from them and LeBron. But and when you talked about LeBron earlier a little bit, I actually do think he's going to stay in Cleveland next year. I actually don't think he's going to leave personally. And the reason, well, that's a tough one, I guess, because I'm just thinking about his relationship with the owner, Dan Gilbert. I just don't know. I think he might end up being pushed out. But I think, more than anything, I actually think LeBron wants to stay in Cleveland. I think that's the important thing. I think that some people might think that he doesn't want to stay. I actually do think he wants to stay in Cleveland. I just don't know if they'll let him stay because of the relationships that have been kind of just, feuding. And he might end up in his heart wanting to stay with the people in the city. But I think he might get forced out at some point and just realize it might not be worth it. But this is, again, a make-or-break year for Cleveland if there ever was one. And it's going to be fun to watch, to be honest with you. I mean, this could be one of LeBron James' last attempts at the finals, depending on what teams he goes to. Because I know people talk about if he goes to the West in LA or wherever he goes, that he will, be a contender and they'll be a contender. But the Warriors will still be relevant, and I don't know if they can beat them within the West. Even the Spurs will be relevant as well. So if he goes to the West, I don't know if his days will ever be the same when we think about him as being that guy to go to the finals year in, year out.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know, it's really tough for me because obviously LeBron has so much invested in the city of Cleveland, and so it makes sense for him to stay. But at the same time, he's kind of done what he came here to do. He promised that he would end the championship drought that Cleveland has had, and that's what he did. He's sent so many kids from Cleveland to college. He's helped the economy, helped the community. So if he does decide to leave, I don't know if anybody can fault him for that. But that being said, he stated multiple times that he wants to be a billionaire. He wants to expand his brand, beyond the game of basketball. He wants to follow in Jordan's footsteps of being this, cultural icon who has an impact on, not just people who follow basketball, but the world as a whole. And so, what better place to do that than the best market in the country and maybe the best market in the world in the city of Los Angeles? He has his company that he helps run, Clutch Sports. He's doing a little bit of investing now. His media headquarters is centered in LA, and I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go LA. And I think that because he won that title for Cleveland, the possibility of him leaving became very, very, very real. Because he's done what he set out to do, and there will be no burning of his jersey this time. There will be no letter from Dan Gilbert criticizing his character and his very nature as a man. That's not going to happen this time around, because the Cleveland fans aren't stupid, and they realize what he did for them and what he did for that city and what he did for that franchise. And if on the tail end of his career he wants to go chase rings in the West and do some other things, that's his right. That's what he should be able to do. And there's not a soul in Cleveland that can criticize the man, in my opinion. So I am leaning towards him leaving, especially with how non-committal he's been towards staying. I feel like if he really wanted to stay, he would come out and say it, especially with all this Kyrie drama going on. But he's been weirdly silent. There's rumors of him being discontent with the owner again, with the management again, with the way they handled the Kyrie situation, the way they handled the David Griffin situation, and how weak their free agency had been up until the Derrick Rose signing. So I don't know if he's going to stay. My guess is I'm leaning towards he's probably going to walk. But you brought up something earlier, and it was about Kyrie again. And I know we're about to wrap it up, so we'll finish on this here. But Kyrie, is he going to play hard? Or are we going to have a Vince Carter situation in Toronto? For those of you who don't remember, Vince Carter got into a bit of a spat with the ownership of the Raptors. They got into a pretty big, heated discussion. Vince Carter asked for a trade. The Raptors basically told him, no, we're not going to trade you. And Vince said, okay, and he pounded it. And he averaged about 15 points a game for half the season before the Raptors finally traded him. And when they traded him to the Nets, all of a sudden, we saw Vince Carter again, and he averaged, 26 points a game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, something like that, and was a contender for the All-NBA team just from with his time with Brooklyn. I don't know. Do I think Kyrie is that type of guy? No, I don't. I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to throw his performance. I think he's far too competitive for that. But it could happen, and we could have a Vince Carter situation 2.0 on our hands. And I think that would really make things interesting because it would seriously diminish what Cleveland could get for him in a trade if he so obviously did not want to be there.
Yeah, I agree completely, like 100% on that. Kyrie Irving, whether or not he plays hard, is going to be interesting to watch for certain. I don't know. It's a crazy situation again. The fact that he is the person who kind of instigated it, not necessarily wanted to make it so publicly known, but the fact that it's out there is kind of crazy because nothing really bad was displayed. But again, something might have happened that he just didn't like, and if he doesn't really want to stay there anymore, I don't know what the mindset is. I can't relate. I don't know what the mindset would be like to go into the season on a team that you just don't really want to be at, and then the other players that you're playing with maybe aren't comfortable with you being on the team because you don't really show a lot of faith in the guy that gave you the opportunity to win those championships past 3 seasons. So it'll be fun to watch, to say the least. But that's going to be exciting to see in the next season.
So what's your prediction? Is Kyrie a Cavalier at the end of the 2017-2018 season?
I don't think he's a Cavalier, no. I wouldn't say no.
I don't think he is either. I think there's no way they keep him after this whole spat.
I don't see how they keep him either. That's just a lot to stick out. That's a lot to stick through and just grind through. And I don't know if they have the time or energy to deal with that, to be honest with you. I think it's a lot of media attention that is really not wanted. And they already got going with Cleveland. I don't see them keeping him. I think they'll look to move him for some pieces.
Yeah. Well, I think that just about wraps us up. You got anything else to add? Anything else you want to talk about?
No. I think that just about wraps up what we had in the NBA and the recent discussions. Nothing else crazy going on. We touched on Gallinari, obviously Carmelo a little bit, the whole Cleveland situation and Kyrie. So just excited to see what happens in the next month of August and hopefully get on into the NBA season as fast as possible.
All right. Well, as always, check the bio of the podcast for some links. We have the blog up and running, doing well. We're both putting out a couple pieces a week. Some good stuff there. Pretty soon we should be getting into some NFL stuff as well. So
Yep. Yep.
For our NFL fans out there, stay tuned because we'll definitely be getting in the swing of football here pretty quick, both college and professional. So, but until next time, I think this is going to be us signing off.